Ooh, it's finally happening. Derek Carr coming in for a visit. Is he the perfect fit for the future of the New York Jets?
Jets, 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 Jets!
Welcome to Jets Talk. My name is Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, I go live every Monday at 8 o'clock for my live call-in show. This week, I'll have good friend Robbie Sabo from Jets X Factor on, so make sure you hang out with us and ask us all your Jet-related questions. And then Tuesday, we come back with our Talkin' Jets panel, myself, O'Leary, and Greenbean, and just hanging out, having a good time, trying to figure out what's going on in this little Jets world that we find ourselves in. But let's move on to our topic of the day. This one's exciting. Derek Carr coming in for a visit with the New York Jets. This is a quarterback that everyone's kind of been buzzing about, and it's sort of polarizing on the fan base. And I want to go into it, and I want to talk about the pros, the cons, everything that goes into potentially signing Derek Carr. And is it even a good fit? Some of the questions I want to take a look at: what is the cost going to be? Not just the contract, but maybe the long-term financial cost that this could be over the next few seasons. Is he a good fit? Is he the quarterback the Jets need? So we'll look at some stats that I found interesting. Does his personality fit the New York area? That seems to be a popular question for the New York Jets fans that are maybe a little anxious on him and don't necessarily want to see him in New York. He's, crying at the podium, that whole thing. We'll get into that. And can he win a Super Bowl? Because I think that's the ultimate question that you need to be able to come down to at the end of the day and say, look, this is why we're giving you all this money. This is a big-time investment for our franchise, and you kind of got to figure that out. So first and foremost, let's talk about the cost. He was set to have $32-ish million coming to him this year, with $40 million each of the next 2 years. That was the contract he had with the Raiders. Now, he did have a no-trade clause, so he was able to decline any trade, but only one team had a trade offer accepted, and that was the Saints. So he was able to talk to the Saints already. The Jets did inquire. By all reports that I've heard, we didn't actually make an offer, or we didn't have an offer accepted, I would say, at the least. Or maybe they did not want to trade him within the AFC East and they weren't even going to accept an offer. I don't actually know that portion of it. But the Jets were the other team to at least inquire about him. So him coming to New York first is really interesting here. So teams were not willing to trade for him on his current contract. But he, obviously, I think in his camp, he wanted to decline all trades anyway and hit free agency because he's going to get more than the guaranteed $40 million he would have been guaranteed anyway. So there was no real benefit in waiving his no-trade clause. So at the very least, he's going to get what he was probably going to get on this contract that he was on with the Raiders, but it's going to be structured a lot differently. So when you look at what this could cost the Jets, you're probably looking at an average of $35 million a year over the course of maybe a 4 or 5 year contract. I really like the looks of that, and you can structure it in such a way that he gets a signing bonus this year and the cap hits are smaller this year, but then they escalate as time goes on. And the thought is in 2024, the salary cap is going to shoot through the roof because that $100 billion TV deal is going to hit. And that's kind of the thought process with the Patrick Mahomes 10-year contract. You sign it now, it's absolutely enormous, but by the time those bigger cap hits kick in, it's actually going to be a lower percentage of your cap overall than it is currently. So I think the Jets could take advantage of that side of contract structuring with Derek Carr. If you sign Derek Carr, as far as Zach Wilson is concerned, you do have him sitting behind. You probably are in a situation where you're just going through the motions. Maybe you're looking at trading him after, by the trade deadline, maybe in the offseason after you kind of rebuild some of his image and maybe some of his stats. Derek Carr to me seems like a longer-term answer than it is a short-term answer like maybe a Rodgers could be. So with that financial side of things, the contract is one thing. The Jets can pay it. I'm not concerned. Salary cap-wise, we're sitting at net zero right now, but we have $112 million in 2024 salary cap space that you can structure contracts in. Not to mention you can cut a bunch of players, restructure guys, and get $50 million in salary cap space pretty quickly. So that's one side of things. But could Derek Carr be using us for leverage? This is something that the Jets have had done to them in the past. Anthony Barr and Kirk Cousins were two very famous examples of this. I believe Jared Mayo as well, or Dante Hightower. I think it was Dante Hightower for the Patriots used us as leverage to get more money from the Patriots as well. So that is a factor. Now, the Jets do play Vegas this year, maybe Carr wants to take a little stab at his former team. That would be kind of cool here. But as far as cost goes, where have the Jets ranked? Over the course of the last 10 years, this is where the Jets have ranked in terms of spending on the quarterback position. 10 years. Of those 10 years, the Jets have picked in the top 13 of the draft 9 out of 10 years. 9 out of 10 years. The other pick was 18 or 20 with Darren Lee when we missed the playoffs that year with Fitzpatrick. That's the only season that we had an outside the top 13 pick. And the 13th pick was this year. But it's a little skewed because obviously you have you're going for rookie quarterbacks. You have Sanchez. That's why the contract ticked up in 2013 because we paid him that contract. Then you had Geno Smith you drafted Hackenberg, you draft Sam Darnold, you draft Zach Wilson. So naturally, you're going to have the benefit of a rookie contract. So it's not fully an apples-to-apples comparison because you're trying a different type of swing than the salary cap would necessarily indicate. But you can't argue that the spending on quarterback is at least part of the problem for the New York Jets. Now, as far as is he a good fit for us, I saw this tweet by Samini, a little run of tweets here, and I wanted to go through some of the stats. These are the top quarterbacks that the Jets are really going to have options for. So when you look at quarterbacks under pressure, Carr was third out of the list here. When you look at quarterbacks in the red zone, he drops down a little bit more. You look at open throw percentage and tight window percentage. This is kind of where Carr ranks. Now, as far as under pressure, that's a good thing. That's telling me that when he's pressured, he's under pressure, we don't have like the best offensive line right now, he can at least make a sound decision. In the red zone, that depends on a case-by-case basis to me. I think when you're talking about in the red zone, there's such you're not necessarily going off script. You're not necessarily going through a ton of progressions because of the depth of the field. So you're trying to make a throw quick. So a lot of that could be on play calling itself and it maybe not just working out. But again, 23rd out of 33. This is out of 33 qualified candidates as well. I was a little surprised to see Rodgers is low on that list too. And I consider him a good quarterback, obviously, so I don't know if that necessarily has a great correlation. Open throw percentage, this was the completion percentage based on a 3 to 5 yard separation from wide receiver to cornerback or nearest defender. Carr hitting 13th in the league. That's really solid considering Zach was 31st. These are the easy throws. These are the throws that we're saying you need to be able to hit if you're an NFL caliber quarterback, and you can see where the benefit would be. Again, I'm actually shocked Rodgers is as low on this list. This has me slightly more concerned than I otherwise would have been. And then tight window throws, Carr was a little bit lower, and then you see Rodgers higher on this. So Rodgers has the accuracy. So I guess the open throws aren't so much the concern. Maybe his guys just weren't getting that open. They're young rookie wide receivers and whatnot with Watson. Where Carr had more veteran wide receivers, and he wasn't able to have quite as much success on the tight window throws. I guess there's probably warts with all these different quarterbacks, but I thought those stats in particular were interesting. The other thing I hear people talk about is his record against playoff teams and his record with under sub 40 degrees. All issues that could definitely be a thing. 12 and 44 against playoff teams. That's a major concern. Now, his defense has been no better than 20th in the league. You got to imagine the Jets will at least be somewhere in the top 10 next year. They may not quite be as high as 5, but you got to think they'll be in better shape than any of his Raiders defenses prior. And then temperatures under 40 degrees, 2 and 10, 14 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. That's not great. I can see where that could be an issue. And with Carr, you almost wonder, like, is it like a psychological thing with him and he feels he can't play in 40 degree weather or below? Or is it like, just he doesn't do it very frequently? Because you're talking over the course of, a 9 or 10 year career, 12 games. Those games, cold weather, tend to happen towards the end of a schedule. If your team is theoretically really bad, like the Raiders have kind of been, you sort of roll over a little bit easier in those later parts of the season. So I can understand why a bad record could happen there. You'd have to go back and look at each play on a case-by-case basis. And I think he had like 3 or 4 interceptions. I don't remember what it was, but he had a ton of interceptions in the Steeler game that was like 15 degrees or whatever this past year. I think it's the one he got benched in. So a lot of it is kind of skewed by that last game as well. So something to look into for sure. What other questions was I going over here? So does he fit a need? That was the question we were looking at. Is he a good fit? Does he fit the need? I think when you look at what the Jets are looking for and you say, okay, do the Jets win last year with steady quarterback play? Derek Carr has been available 142 games out of 144 games for the Raiders. That is stability. That is the word that we saw Joe Douglas kind of harp on in his postseason at press conferences and whatnot. That is availability is the best ability. That is absolutely huge. So I think Carr can provide you that. His average over the course of his career is basically 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions a year. That's like steady Eddie, all the time, plug and play. You know exactly what you're getting. It's kind of like when you talk about the Woody Johnson interview where he's like, oh, I think we could swap a quarterback in here, plug and play. Now it could be any number of quarterbacks, but this is a quarterback that I think with stable play can have the defense playing even better. Look at just having like consistently scoring for a defense. If you are playing from a position of strength, you are in the lead, other teams are going to have to then pass the ball to score on you. So they're now rushing, or they're now trying to throw against your pass rush, which is where we have invested money, and they're trying to throw against your cornerbacks, where we have invested money, which could lead to more turnovers and interceptions. And that, to me, is what we saw in the beginning half of the season, although the only reason we kind of saw it more in the beginning half of the season was probably because poor quarterback play on the other side of the field, but we got the benefit of having the lead. So I think you saw a little bit of what that could look like moving forward if the Jets did get to play with a lead. Next question up, does his personality fit? So I've heard this question a lot because he's a very religious guy. Does he fit maybe more in like the NFC South, the Bible Belt sort of area? New York City is kind of, it's not Sin City like Vegas, but it's I don't know. It feels like more of a rough crowd. His personality, he was crying at the press conference this year. Can he handle New York criticism? And is he, a stable kind of presence in the locker room? And to that I say, this guy would absolutely fit in with the New York Jets. I mean, look at all the love that Jet fans still have for Rex Ryan. How many times have I seen in the comments, and if you guys have been yelling at me, can we get Rex Ryan back either as a head coach or a defensive coordinator under some other head coach? People love Rex Ryan. He was one of our more emotional personalities in the history of our franchise. Derek Carr, emotions are fine. You just got to be able to back it up on the field. So I don't have any issue with that. The other piece to this puzzle is like, how does he fit changing scenery? Because we've seen trades happen with Russell Wilson, with Deshaun Watson, and they get these monster contracts. They have not worked out. What happens? Well, those guys played under one head coach in one city prior to moving to their new city. With Derek Carr, I have less of a concern with that because he has put up like 8 of the best 9 seasons in Jets passing history while having 4 different head coaches, 5 different offensive coordinators in 2 different cities. So I do trust Derek Carr to put up at least the same stable production of points in New York, given all the changes that have happened around him. Him plugging in here, I think, fits perfectly. From a personality standpoint as well, talk about a quarterback with a chip on his shoulder. He is pissed. When you listen to any one of his interviews over the course of the last 2 months, there is very, very sharp, kind of subtle language throughout each interview where he's he's mad at what happened to him in Vegas. And I think he wants the shot to kind of prove the league wrong and show that he is the quarterback. And that to me is something that you can't just, provoke. Like with Zach Wilson, there might be I want to prove the fan base wrong. With Rodgers, it's maybe I want to prove the league wrong. I want to win another MVP. I'm not washed. And there's that sort of a thing. But he's had all the success. Zach Wilson, hasn't quite had the success. And then there's other quarterbacks that come in. But Carr, he was in the MVP caliber conversation the year he finished 3rd the year that the Patriots and the Falcons went to the Super Bowl, and the only 2 players to finish ahead of Derek Carr in MVP voting that year were Matt Ryan and Tom Brady. So Derek Carr is and can play at an MVP caliber level. I don't have any concern with that whatsoever. I think if he plays to that level, then all the other personality stuff, not going to matter in the slightest. And that brings us to our final point here. And can he win a Super Bowl for the New York Jets? This seems to be the one that I hear a lot of fans kind of harp on. And you're talking about, can he compete? What does that mean? Can he compete with Patrick Mahomes? Can he compete with Josh Allen, Burrow, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. Like, there are a lot of really good quarterbacks in the AFC right now. And does Derek Carr move the needle enough for you to compete for a Super Bowl? Because that's ultimately what you're bringing him here to play for. Like, yeah, we do want the playoffs, but ultimately you're going for the ring at the end of the day. So can he win a Super Bowl for you? I think when you look at it, over the last 20 years, the majority of Super Bowls have been entirely skewed because the majority of players that have won it have had the last name Roethlisberger, Manning, or Brady. And it's like, what is that? Over half of the last few Super Bowls. So I wouldn't focus so much on which team and which quarterback specifically wins the Super Bowl as much as you should look at, the quarterbacks that get to the Super Bowl. Because I think for me, when you're looking at playoff runs, you want the quarterback that's going to get you to the playoffs the most consistently. And I think, in my mind, Rodgers and Carr are kind of those two guys that can get you to that point. And with Carr, it's going to last longer. It's going to be that 4 or 5 years, 6 years potentially. He's like 31, 32 years old. Where with Rodgers, you're talking, 2 year, maybe 3 if he restructures his deal again. But you're talking about a longer stretch. So you're getting 5, 6 shots arguably at the playoffs as opposed to Rodgers that may only give you 2. Then you have to consider, okay, well, what wins you a Super Bowl once you get into the playoffs? And to me, I think a lot of that has to do with the health of your team at the time and the momentum you have going into the playoffs. And that you can look no further than 2 different trips from the Giants. You have the Eagles winning a Super Bowl. You have, the Bengals went on a tear to get into the Super Bowl. They wound up losing to the Rams. But you can look around at other examples over the course of the last few years where a team just gets hot and they can win at the right time. So for me, I do think Derek Carr can get to that, level of Eli Manning kind of caliber play, even to the quarterbacks that lost, guys like Matt Ryan. I think Carr can play to that level. I think if this league, like we have seen every single week of the season, it isn't any given Sunday week. The worst team in the league could beat the best team in the league like any given Sunday. Just things bounce the weird way. Flags get called certain ways. Calls, players drop. Injuries happen. There's just so many variables that could happen. So for me, I do think Carr can provide a stable enough foundation for the New York Jets, both from a very good player standpoint, from a stats perspective. I think from a leadership perspective, he could be exactly what this young team needs to see in a captain. Maybe not so much the guy that's, at the last 2 years of his career in Rodgers. Maybe there's some concern with how invested is he in the process. I think Carr's definitely going to give you 100%. And I don't want to say I don't think Rodgers is, but these are the values that I think you're looking at in Derek Carr and what you would try to bring into your team. So to me, I think he's 100% a personality fit. I think the money works out. You're not giving up draft picks to get him. You're paying more so in the financial realm, but you could structure it in a way that it's not going to impact you too bad over the course of a longer career. So guys, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you like Derek Carr as an option for the New York Jets? Do you think he winds up signing with the New York Jets? Do you think we are going to get used as leverage for another team so Derek Carr can get more money and go elsewhere? Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. And as always, go Jets.